welcome tonight. And Darla, if you'd like to take over, we're anxious to see what's going to happen at our park.
All right, very good. We do have a PowerPoint, if John wants to bring that up. While he's doing that, let me just start with a thank you to you all, Mayor Koenig and members of the board and staff, and especially for giving us this opportunity to speak with you today. We couldn't find a time when you had a normal board meeting, so we're especially grateful that you're accommodating to us so that we could have this meeting tonight to share an update for you on our long-range visitor use management planning as well as our plan for this year. So why don't we start by introducing ourselves. You kind of did that already, Mayor, but we'll just make sure everybody knows who we are. I am Darla Sidles, and I'm the Superintendent of Rocky Mountain National Park. Kyle, you want to go next?
Everyone, my name is Kyle Patterson, and I'm the Public Affairs Officer and Management Specialist here at Rocky. Thank you for your time this evening.
John?
Yeah, John Hannon, Management Specialist at Rocky, and I'm the lead for our visitor use planning efforts at the park.
All right, very good. So let's go to the second slide. Just wanted to provide a bit of a reminder and some context about why we're here tonight speaking with you and our focus on visitor use management. As you all know, Rocky Mountain National Park is an extremely popular and busy place. The last normal visitor season, which was 2019, we were the third busiest national park in the entire national park system. And we had 4.6 million visitors that year, which represents about a 44% increase over the last 7 years. And you can see the statistics there. Just in a short 4-month period, June through September, we saw 3.2 million visitors. And so we know that we're expecting the visitation this year to continue to increase dramatically because of what we're calling the COVID crush. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But just interestingly, last year, even with our timed entry permit system that we initiated, the first national park in the country to do so, followed by a number of others, I might add. Even with that timed entry pilot system, with COVID-19 and with 2 of Colorado's largest wildfires impacting the park, believe it or not, we were still the 4th most visited national park in the system last year. Wow. So it's a pretty amazing statistic when you think that all of those things really didn't make that much of an impact. Let's go ahead and go to slide 3. And so, the congestion, the traffic jams, the resource impacts, and the not so great visitor experience are really what prompted us back in 2016 to begin our visitor use management pilots in our heavy congested areas such as Bear Lake and Alpine Visitor Center and Wild Basin. And that's where we, when the parking lots would fill due to congestion, we have been restricting visitors and not allowing anyone to come in until there are spaces. So we've been doing that. We did it 2016 through 2019. And during that time, we also initiated what we're calling our day use visitor access strategy. And because we're a federal government, of course, we need an acronym. We're calling it DUVOS. That is our long range day use visitor access strategy. And so, in order for us to discuss and have public engagement meetings for a permanent system, a permanent visitor use system, that's what we're calling the long range visitor management plan. And so tonight we're going to be talking about two different things, and I want to just be very clear that they are two separate, but they are very much interrelated plans. And so before I turn it over to John to discuss this year's temporary strategy, I want to provide you all with an update on our long-range permanent visitor access strategy. So let's go ahead and go to slide 4. So our long-range plan, civic engagement opportunities. Again, this is for us to make permanent changes in significant visitor use management strategies. The federal government uses a process called NEPA, that's National Environmental Policy Act. And that is a process that engages the public to get feedback, to get suggestions, and input on a range of alternatives. So for this long-range permanent plan, we're going to be conducting virtual public meetings in May of this year. And so you will be hearing more about that. We're going to start with the reason why we are looking at a long-range permanent plan, what the resource and the park impacts are from all of the increased visitation over this last decade. We'll look at definition of what the park's desired future conditions are, and those change depending upon what zone you would be looking at in the park. So we'll have a zoning map for the park that distinguishes between, say, a front country experience, very close to the visitor centers and parking lots and motorized access, and then, a different zone for wilderness and a more remote primitive opportunities. And then the last part of that public engagement for our long-range permanent plan will be a draft conceptual visitor management strategies. This all is actually pre-NEPA, so we have not even started the NEPA process yet for our long-range plan. What we'll do is once we've had the public engagement meetings, we'll compile a report this autumn, and we will expect to formally begin the NEPA process for the long-range plan next year. And that will include another round of civic engagement and public meetings, and at that time, a more solid range of alternatives. So again, distinguishing between our long-range plan and what we've been doing up until now, including this year, that is our temporary plan for this year. I'm going to turn that over to John to talk about our plan, temporary plan for this year. But before I do that, just a reminder that all of these things that we've been doing since 2016, the visitor use restrictions from 2016 to 2019, last year's timed entry, and then this year's plan, that all provides really important data and opportunities for us to try different things to see what might work, what we know doesn't work, so that when we do propose a permanent solution under the long-range plan, that we've got a lot more informed data about what will work. It's a lot smarter than throwing a plan out there with some alternatives that we don't know how they would work. Mm-hmm. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. John Hannon. He, again, is our visitor use management planning specialist for the park, and he will talk about this year's temporary plan. So go ahead, John.
Thanks, Darla. Yeah, and before we start talking about this year's plan, I'm going to do a little recap of what we learned last year during the timed entry that we implemented last year. Just a brief kind of reminder how we got to that program last year. If you think back a year ago, we were having this meeting. We were in the midst of COVID and emerging guidelines from the CDC, state, and the local agencies. The big need last year was to manage the expected crowding and congestion that the park typically sees, that Darla gave mention to in the previous years. The big goal that we had last year was to better spread the use throughout the day. Rocky typically has seen a big crunch in visitation between 10 and 2 or 10 and 3 during the day. And it was really important for us to kind of, hate to say it, but flatten that curve and move that visitation throughout the day. That way it was better spaced, better opportunities for social distancing. And again, taking into account, our neighbors, the gateway communities, with the at-risk populations that we have in the area, wanted to minimize the influx of a lot of folks coming to the area as they typically do. Again, the park, we faced staffing challenges like many of the businesses in the area did as well. The restrictions on the housing that we could provide for employees due to COVID, no more shared rooms, a limited number of people to share bathrooms, that really hit us. Probably in rough numbers, we were probably about a third of our summer seasonal staff we didn't have last year that we typically have. The other thing, we had big impacts to our shuttle system. We were at 20% capacity. So, that meant 20 people per shuttle bus. And our shuttle bus is a very key component in our parking and visitor movement in the park. So the big lessons learned, the big takeaways from last year, we already knew some of this, but it was really confirmed under the timed entry pilot. Bear Lake is popular. It's really popular. It's the primary destination for many, many of our visitors. And if you were in the park last year and you were able to see, the Bear Lake area, the Bear Lake corridor remained pretty well used, and it was kind of near that level of full, while the rest of the park was significantly reduced. For example, the Alpine Visitor Center, we've actively managed that parking lot over the last several years. Last year, under the timed entry, that parking lot was never more than half full and didn't require any intervention or management from park staff. The other thing that we learned last year is we were able to shift demand throughout the day. We were very successful at temporally distributing visitors throughout the day. And in fact, we saw significant increases before and after the reservation period, most notably in the 5 p.m. and beyond hours. Typically, if you look at our previous data from traffic counts that we had in the park, people typically leave the park between 3:30 and 5. There's a huge spike in exit traffic, and we saw people entering the park at 5 p.m. last year because that's when the reservations period ended. The other thing that we saw, which is pretty incredible to us, is we saw pretty rapid adoption of the system for the public that did plan ahead and did make the reservations. Rocky is fortunate that we do have a lot of repeat visitors. We do have a lot of visitors from the Front Range. So once word got out and things got up and running, it was pretty good acceptance and utilization of the reservations for those that could plan ahead. So the pros of the system that we saw last year is spreading that use throughout the day. We were really able to better utilize kind of the infrastructure that we had, and more evenly spread use throughout the day. So that avoided that, crunch times and peak crowding that we typically see in the park. And it certainly met those COVID guidelines to give an opportunity for folks to social distance. We did hear back from the gateway communities on the east and west side of the park that even though we had COVID-19 in place and we had significant wildfire activity late in the season, there was not huge cuts to sales tax revenues. The other thing is visitors under the timed entry or under the reservation system. For those visitors that typically plan ahead, this was a really good opportunity for them to plan their visit. No need to come to the area prior or get up early, because if you know you had a time slot where you were guaranteed to get in, again, helping to distribute that use throughout the day. really helped with traffic flow and really helped with parking utilization at some of our most popular lots. It allowed us on the staffing side, since we were already short, to better utilize the staff that we did have, because we knew kind of the allocations of visitors coming in and where they would be and where kind of our pinch points and most necessary areas to address would be. So that was a real benefit for us. The other thing is I already mentioned the parking areas, but we did see also reduced queuing at our entrance stations. Again, anytime you take away that big surge of people at 10 o'clock and spread that throughout the day, that just makes it easier for everything. And it was really good. The last pro, it was a great opportunity to pilot a system like this. We're going to take the lessons learned that we got from it and incorporate that into long-range strategies. Better to do something under kind of a temporary system, learn your lessons, make your tweaks moving forward, than start out with a permanent solution and find out it doesn't quite meet the bar. So, of course, with any system, there's going to be cons and things that we learn. One of the big cons that we had last year is we had such a short turnaround time to implement the system. Not only we design it, implement it, train staff, get the word out to visitors and the public. Very short turnaround time there. A lot of late nights by at least the three of us for sure, and many other park staff as well. But it seemed to go okay. But, in a perfect world, we would have had much more lead time and worked out some of the big bugs ahead of time. We did see some challenges for staff and visitors using the system. Again, anything new, when it launched, it wasn't perfect. Some of the wording on the recreation.gov site was not, it was a little confusing. We made some tweaks throughout the season that made that a little better. But again, challenging for some, but a vast majority of the people adopted it and used it pretty readily. One of the other cons that we saw is since we were aiming for 60% of our parking and shuttle capacity last year, that meant very limited reservations. So not everybody got one, and not everybody got one for the time that they wanted to come in. Those morning slots filled out first, and then the afternoon ones sold out later. So certainly probably not the first choice for many of our visitors to start in the park at 3, but it was what it was. The other challenging thing for us is the park's outlying areas. And by outlying areas, I mean the parts of the park that aren't behind the entrance station, aren't part of the core area. Examples of that on the Estes Park side would be Lumpy Ridge, Lily Lake. Those areas have always been kind of challenging to manage for us because they're not part of the main park. They're little satellite areas. And under the reservations, that just kind of added an additional layer of complication for staff and visitors alike. A lot of confusion. Historically, those areas, I think, by many people has been seen as free areas. And then you overlay that with reservations required in those areas. So it was very challenging for visitors and for staff as well. The other thing that we found is we had held back 10% of the reservations for a 48 advanced sale, so 48 hours prior to the day. You could either look at that two ways. It worked super well because when they launched at 8 o'clock in the morning, they were sold out by 8:03. Really, that was more of a negative because a lot of people banked on having those or getting those, and they just couldn't. They were just not enough, and at that time frame, just didn't work well. Some examples there: we had about 600 available each day, and recreation.gov was having about between 1,500 and 2,500 people on the website at 8 o'clock vying for those 600. So that program, or that part of the program, wasn't the best, I'll say. And again, I mentioned it earlier, but there was some confusion with visitors using the recreation.gov reservation system, not only with the wording, not only with, just the whole kind of setup and logistics of it. Again, it was the first time that a national park has put a timed entry system on that site. So a lot of, learning curve and impacts there. The other thing is we did see a lot of impact to cross-park travel. There's a large segment of folks that use Trail Ridge Road to get to and from different areas between the western slope and the east. We saw that it was most notable on Sunday afternoon as I-70 becomes I-70. A lot of people see Trail Ridge Road is a good option to get, especially if those living in the northern Front Range. And with the reservation things, they had to wait till after 5 p.m. to use the road for that. So that's kind of the wrap up on last year, but then I wanted to incorporate some trends that we're seeing before we get into talking about this year. Some of the trends that we're seeing that's kind of feeding into what we're doing this year is we're seeing continued increases in local visitation. Darla mentioned up front our increased visitation throughout the winter so far. Lots of the surrounding public lands, county open space, they're seeing visitation increases in the 200% range. The other thing that's happening in response to that is there's several other land management agencies in northern Colorado Front Range looking at implementing visitor use management pilots as well. Probably you'll hear more about that as the months roll out. We're expecting the COVID-19 guidelines to continue throughout 2021 in some form or fashion. Us on the federal side of the house, we are seeing a federal mask mandate that's in place. That's going to be additionally challenging. It applies to park staff, it applies to park buildings, it applies to outdoor areas where social distancing can't be accomplished. And I think that'll be continue to be challenging down the road. As you see, the state is already pulling off the mask mandate. And so there's a disparity there between what's happening in the park and what's happening outside the park. So that's an additional challenge for us. Again, moving forward, we're still going to be having shuttle bus capacity limitations. We were down to about 20% of ridership or 20% capacity last year. This year, the guidelines were starting out at 50% capacity, still a big impact to us. The other thing that we're dealing with is we're still looking at trails affected by the fire. Certainly on the west side of the park, we're expecting a lot of trails to remain closed for the season. On the east side of the park, probably see many trails staying closed initially and opening at different times during the summer. Some of these trails we've not been able to assess properly yet because of the weather moved in and the timing of the end of the fire. And again, we're looking at reduced summer seasonal staffing due to COVID-19, shared housing issues, people's willingness to come and work and live with the people they don't know. So let's talk about this year's proposal. So taking all those things that we've learned last year, we're looking at offering 2 types of reservations in the park this year. Now, one of the reservations would be for the Bear Lake Road corridor. And when we're talking about the Bear Lake Road corridor, we're basically talking from the junction with Trail Ridge Road and Bear Lake Road. You'll need a reservation to get into that corridor, and the daily reservation period will start at 5 in the morning, 5 a.m., and run through 6 p.m. at night. The other reservation that we're looking at is a reservation for what we're calling rest of the park, which excludes the Bear Lake Road corridor. And that reservation period, we're only going to have that from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. each day. Now, looking back at the lessons learned from last year, we found out that most people go to Bear Lake Road corridor, and that's the primary destination for their park visit. And we were finding that corridor remained near full or remained near capacity throughout the day, while the rest of the park was highly underutilized. And so we have more capacity to offer there this year, and that's why we're having 2 different reservations. The thing that people will be able to do, they'll be able to get one or the other. So naturally, you'll need to pass through the rest of the park to access Bear Lake Road. So that will include that. But you don't need both. You just get one or the other. Those that get the one for Bear Lake Road corridor will get access to the corridor. And then the other option will be rest of the park. That will have the 9 to 3. We're going to start requiring reservations on the Friday of Memorial Day weekend, May 28th, and then it'll run through October 11th. Here's the windows. We're doing 2-hour windows like we did last year as well. Again, for Bear Lake Road corridor, starting at 7, going to 6 p.m. For the rest of the park, it's 9 to 3. So you can see access to kind of everything outside of Bear Lake we're only really targeting that 10 to 2 peak that we typically see. Folks will be able to access before and after that reservation period. We are anticipating, as we saw last year, that we are going to drive additional use into those hours by doing that. So we're taking that into account. So let's go over some of the benefits that we see of the two-type reservation system. It certainly allows for greater numbers of reservations per day, greater than what we did last year. This year, we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 to 85% of the park's total parking capacity. Again, it still better utilizes the parking and trailheads by spreading that use throughout the day, but also throughout the park this time. And then the shorter rest of the park reservation period allows for a little more flexibility with local traffic, local visitors, that cross-park travel that I talked about earlier, and then those who happen to show up without reservations. The reservation period being shorter, they'll have a little more opportunity before and after to get in, not needing a reservation. And again, this system is pretty adaptable to any changes that we see in visitation trends, and then certainly anything regarding public health as well. So that's kind of the brief overview of what we're proposing this year. So we're going to use the rest of the time just to take your questions and let you know, or let you ask what you want to know rather than us trying to tell you everything we think you should know.
Well, thank you very much, John. We have people in the audience, and I just want to let them know that during normal report and discussion type meetings, we don't take public input, but in the public packet, and if you're interested, there we had some questions that might be nice for you all to see. So you can download that from the town website if you'd like to look at those, John. I think they would be interesting for you all to see. Do we have anyone on the town board that has a question? Yes, Trustee Bangs.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. My question was in how you're defining capacity. I know last year you guys did 60%, and then this year you're saying 75 to 85. But what does capacity look like, and what different factors are you looking at when you just decide on what 100% capacity looks like?
Yeah, so in these pilots, we are looking at basically the parking and shuttle capacity of the park. So purely looking at it kind of at a vehicle-based level. We're not taking into account, there's other ways to do it. You could look at trail capacity and stuff. But for these pilots, we're purely looking at, how many parking spaces are there? How often do they turn over? Because we have that data as well. So, you got to remember when we have like a Bear Lake is like a 200 space lot, but it turns over, the average length of stay is just under 3 hours. So that turns over, so that can represent, probably about 800 cars during that reservation period. So that's what we're looking at on this one.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do we have another question? Yes, Trustee Warbermeyer.
No, not so much a question as just I appreciate the extraordinary effort you folks put into considering trying to manage this Herculean effort. You know, the circumstance of the park being loved to death, and not just this park, but parks throughout the country, has been an ongoing issue for years and years. And I think you've nailed it relative to the COVID crush that we might anticipate this upcoming summer. I think the key piece is going to be pushing this point of view and information out to the public. In my own unique little corner of the universe, I end up dispensing more information than I'd really care to relative to what's available, what's open, when it's available, and that sort of thing. So I think your plan is well considered and may not meet everybody's desired outcome, but the better we can share this point of view, particularly relative to us older folks who may not be planning quite as far ahead or quite as technically capable of determining what the availability is going to be key to the success and satisfaction of everybody. And that point aside, thank you very much. Well thought out process.
Okay.
Fine job.
Thank you, Trustee Webermeyer. I do have a question I think that might help our citizens. And I don't know who wants to take this, Darla or Kyle. But I think that there may be a little confusion on what authority the town has over Rocky Mountain National Park. And I think, am I still muted? No, I'm not. And I would, I want people to get their comments to you efficiently and have their voices heard. And I know you're going to have public comment, but can you address that? I know at the beginning of the pandemic, the previous mayor wrote a letter and it gave the impression that, we could ask you guys to do whatever we wanted and it would happen. And I know that there's tremendous research that goes into everything that you do with the park, and we are separate entities. So I just want people to know where to go. Can you address that, please?
I can address the first part of that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Yes, so Rocky Mountain National Park is one of more than 400 national parks as part of the national park system throughout the United States. And we are a federal government entity, and we report to the Department of the Interior, which is one of, a number of agencies in the federal government and public land management agencies. And so while, there is no direct nexus with regard to, approval of federal government policies or procedures, we definitely, it's in all of our best interests, both the towns and the counties and the national parks, including Rocky, to work closely with you all to ensure that, we are working together on common issues. And so
Correct.
We're more partners, and we certainly, that's part of the reason for this meeting tonight, is to share our plans and proposals just as you all do with us. And it's a great relationship that we have both with Estes Park and with Grand Lake and all three counties that Rocky is in. So it's a partnership, but not one connected in any kind of hierarchy.
Right.
And Kyle, did you want to address any other aspect of that with regard to the public comment?
I think as far as public comment and communication, just following what Trustee Webermeyer said as well, we also rely very much on our partners with the town and with our partners as well to help us get the word out. So once we are able to share this more broadly, which will be within the next, week, then, we do appreciate being able to communicate to our mutual visitors and guests as best we can. And we know that we've been hearing from a lot of park visitors that are saying, hey, when can I purchase a ticket? You know, they're already seeing what's happening in other public lands throughout the United States as well. So we just really appreciate coming together with our partners to communicate what we move forward with on this proposal. And as far as public input, you know, certainly we're always very open and as Darla mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation, you know, we are wanting to be as transparent as possible on the long range planning efforts and learning from these pilots. So we'll continue to, you know, receive the public's input through email or whatever venue they want to share their input with us on as we continue to move forward with our long range planning efforts versus this year for the pilot.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I know as trustees, we're happy to communicate the public wishes, but I also want them to know that they can reach out directly to the park so that we do have a partnership and we're working together, but we don't have authority over each other. And sometimes there's a little confusion about that. So thank you very much. And are there any other questions at all? I don't see any. Thank you for taking time.
I have
one more. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you. My apologies. You even raised your hand. Raised your hand. Good job, Barbara.
Oh, actually Cindy raised hers first, so I will concede to her.
Thank you.
Okay, Cindy.
Yeah, I just have a few questions. One, so is this just a proposal that's not yet been sent to the Department of Interior, or has this already been approved? Number one. Number two, what is the cost of the reservation? Reservations this year? And number three, is there going to be any resident discount for park to park, east side to west side? Commuting type thing?
I'll take the first two. So yes, this plan has been vetted through our regional office and the Washington office and the Department of the Interior. So it's a green light from that standpoint. The reservation system will be the same as last year. So as John said, you can get, one of two types of reservations. They will be $2 on rec.gov, in addition to your normal payment that you would be doing no matter what. And the third question, maybe John, that one's for you.
Yeah, it's in relation to cross-park travel. There's not going to be any discounts for it, but then the shorter reservation period, only being 9 to 3, we're hoping that will facilitate and make it easier for those folks that are doing the cross-park travel, doing it outside of that reservation period. We still do have the commuter permit in place. So if you reside in one of the 3 counties within 50 miles of an entrance station, and you can apply for that and show proof of residency with your driver's license. We're hoping that takes care of the vast majority of the cross-park travel.
Okay, thank you very much. And when do you anticipate this opening on the website so we can tell our visitors, what date are you anticipating?
We're targeting that it'll be up and running on the rec.gov site on May 1st. You'd be able to make, when they open on May 1st, you'd be able to make reservations for Memorial Day and the month of June. It would be just like last year. Then on June 1st, you would be able to make reservations for the month of July and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Barbara.
Trustee McAlpine.
No, I only have 2 questions. Sometimes people here that live in the Estes Park area ask if there isn't any sort of special allowance for being local and therefore, a special reservation or something. So I'm just passing along that question. And then this seems obvious, sort of, but people really want to know what's going on. And what do you recommend is the absolute best place to go to find out for sure when something's being scheduled, when they can do reservations, the kinds of information that we've been talking about this evening, but most people are not hearing it right now. So is it the park website? Is there something on Facebook? What would y'all recommend? Thank you.
So thank you very much. We would recommend that folks follow us on social media, and that's at Rocky NPS. And so we have updates on Twitter and Facebook, would be those two main channels. And then also on the park's official website, which is www.nps.gov/ROMO, ROMO. And so when we are publicizing this will go out on all of those channels for people to see. So that would be where we would recommend. And then we also know that a number of our partners also take that information and or link to that information and share that as well. So those would be the places that we would recommend to find that official information.
And that might even be something we could send out as a town announcement, just to, I'm going to another source here, just to kind of let our local folks know, hey, this is really the best place to watch. Okay, thank you. And then the special, anything for local folks?
Well, I'll just start by saying there's nothing specific like a special discount or something like that. Because it's a national park, we just can't really do that. However, we did, look at last year's system, and as John mentioned in the lessons learned part of last year's system, that we did hear that, of course, and any other park that's implementing this, the local population says the same thing. So it's not an unusual question at all. But part of that rest of park reservation system being 9 to 3, that provides additional flexibility for the locals and the people who know what's going on, and also just in general the familiarity with the system and knowing how to make reservations. I think being local, you probably are going to be more informed than maybe somebody who has never been here before or is new to rec.gov. So I think there's, some additional kind of maybe intangible sorts of benefits that locals can enjoy but don't get us crosswise with federal law and regulation.
Thank you, Darla. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I might also say that for those of us who live locally, we get to enjoy everything that's going on here all the time. So we have an added benefit, even if we can't get into the park exactly when we want to. So thanks very much.
Yeah, you may need to get up a little bit earlier if you need to, get in without a reservation, you'll have to get up a little earlier or go later.
Yeah. Okay, I'm doing a better job. I'm looking for blue hand raises and not seeing any. Is there anyone else that has a comment or a question? We can't thank you enough. People have been just wondering what was going to happen, and I really appreciate all of you taking time out of your day to come to this special meeting so we can spread the word about the park. And we do appreciate everything you all do, and we really love our partnership we have. It's so nice to be able to pick up the phone and work with all of you. You're terrific. So thank you, and we're adjourned.
Very good.